Hello, happy new year. Now, I know I did a story yesterday and I do not want to bombard my subscribers and my listeners or whatever. However, riding the wave of New Year's resolutions and the start of 2021 and feeling pumped, I really want to try and just put more content out there. So if you listen to this, great. If not, don't worry, there's going to be more tomorrow or the next day or the next week. So last year I began dedicating each day to different items, and one of those items were stories. So my aim, hopefully, my resolution if you will, is whilst we're not able to do anything and I'm sat at home crawling at the walls, I want to share those stories with you. They won't be polished, they won't be at their best, but they will still be important stories to me, stories that have some sort of substance to them, because as I said, I selected them of the story of that day, and they may be fun to tell. Either way, I'm just trying to put myself out there because 2021 is the do it year. Just do it, make your dreams come true. Bloody grab it by the collar and throttle it. So this is called Anansi, and the witch called Don't Say It. A long, long time ago, in a village in Africa, there lived a witch. An evil, horrible witch who had terrorised the village for a long time. And this witch had a daughter. And because she was so evil and because she was so horrible, she gave that young girl, that young baby, a horrible, horrible name. A name that would make her life that little bit more difficult. Her name was a number, and it's a number that I am afraid to say. But you may guess it over the course of the story. Now, this witch went on and she grew old and she died, and the baby grew up and went to school, and she was bullied at school. It was hard being a number. Whenever the times table was done or whatever, everybody would laugh at her. When her name was called in the register, everybody would laugh at her. Whenever she made any sort of announcement or put her hand up or did anything, everybody would laugh at her. Life was tough. But then she hit the tender age of 13 and she grew her magical powers. And if you had spent your early years being ridiculed because of your name, but then you discovered you had magical powers and you could do anything, what would you do? Well, this girl chose to turn her own name into a curse. She said that if anybody uttered her name, they would instantly disappear. Well, that curse fell across the village almost immediately. Now, whenever they did times table, the teachers were very, very scared when they got to that collection of numbers, knowing that if they said it, they would disappear. When you went to the grocery shop and you paid, the greengrocer was always cautious to make sure that when he told how much it was or the change, he didn't use that term. And at sports competitions, when a successful hit or goal had been achieved, you could never call out, "Hi!" because you would disappear. The whole village was very, very cautious. But that was only the start of this village's problems. Because as it was getting hotter and drier, a terrible famine fell upon it. All around, people were getting hungry. So hungry And Anansi was one of those. He was a young man and he lived with his wife in the village. But Anansi was an opportunist, a greedy opportunist. And when he heard that there was this famine going around, rather than panic buying and going down to the market and getting the last bits of food, he instead went onto the road towards the market. And he placed down a rug, and on the rug he placed some potatoes. He placed 1, he placed 2, he placed 3, he placed 4, and he placed another. And then he waited. And sure enough, down the hill, something was coming. There was dust and the sounds of a horse. And normally, when I tell this story, I get the boys and girls who I am sharing it with to create creatures or characters that these travellers could be. But for the purposes of this story, I'm just going to keep it simple. There, on the horseback, coming down the street, was Chuck Norris. And Anansi stopped the horse and said, Chuck, come down. I know you are the strongest man, and I know you are the source of many conspiracy theories on the internet. I know you are a master actor in cowboy films and the like. But are you clever enough to do a simple task? Chuck said, Anansi, what is this? I'm going down to the market. There's a famine. Nobody has any food. I just want to go and see what they've got left. Well, Chuck, I won't take too much of your time. All I want to do is see if you can answer me a question. See these potatoes. How many potatoes are there? And Chuck said, well, sure, that's easy. 1, 2, 3, 4. And as he said final number, he disappeared. And Anansi took Chuck Norris's horse for himself, and he thought of a new plan. Because if you had done something so successful, if you had made someone vanish, what would you do? The next day, you'd do it all over again. And sure enough, Anansi, now with his horse, he came back even earlier the next day. He put out his rug, he put down those potatoes, and he waited. And sure enough, down that road something was coming. Yes. He couldn't quite see them yet, but there was a number of figures. And as they came closer, he saw them. The lion, the Tin Man, the Scarecrow, Dorothy and her dog Toto. And they came past and they walked past Anansi and Chuck Norris's horse, and they headed to the market. And Anansi waited, and he waited, and he waited. And sure enough, they came back. But now, their hands were full with the most gorgeous things. The bananas, oranges, satsumas, kumquats, pomegranates. They had all sorts of fruit with them. And they came up that road walking past Anansi, and Anansi said, oh, I'm so sad. I'm so sad. And Dorothy came and said, oh, my poor man. What's the matter with you? You shouldn't be crying on such a lovely day like this. And as he said, well, I never learned how to count. I never went to school. My dad, he's told me to count these potatoes, and if I can't count them, I shouldn't return home. No, she said, no, don't worry. Don't worry. I and my friends here will help you do it. Look, if we all do it together, maybe it'll make this boy... What's your name? Anansi! Maybe it'll make Anansi feel a bit better. And sure enough, in unison, the Tin Man, the Scarecrow, the Lion, and Dorothy all began to count. 1, 2, 3, 4. But when they said that final number, crash, they all disappeared. The dog Toto fell to the ground and scuttled, and Anansi grabbed him and stroked him and put him with Chuck Norris's horse. And all of that fruit that they had been holding, the oranges and the satsumas and the bananas and the kumquats and the pomegranates, fell to the ground. And Anansi picked them all up and he took them home for his dinner. Well, his plan had worked. The first time he'd made Chuck Norris disappear and he got the horse. The second time he made the cast of the Wizard of Oz disappear and now he had loads of fruits. Sure enough, he was going to try it again. So on the third day, he came even earlier. He put down his mat, he put down those potatoes, and he waited. And waited. Waited. But it had been a few days now of famine, and not many people were going to the market to panic buy. Just when he was about to give up, he heard a noise coming from down the road. And he could just make out, as it got closer, that it was the old lady who lived next door to him, Ethel. And Ethel came with her walking stick, slowly, slowly. And Anansi waited as she passed, knowing that he'd have to wait for her to come back from the market. But eventually she was gone. She was gone to the market, and Anansi knew he only had to wait a little bit longer and then she'd come back. Well, the market was now completely running out of stuff. There was only a few items left. So, boys and girls, what could those few precious items be? Yes, great idea. And as Ethel came back, Anansi saw in her hand was the last roll of toilet roll. And Anansi, he knew it wasn't the best thing that he could get today, but he'd give it a go anyway. And so as Ethel came closer, Anansi stopped her. Ethel, my dear next door neighbour, I have been set a task. Could you count these potatoes for me? You've always been so nice before, and I'll help you out however you want. You know I would. And Ethel went, and she reached down, and she began to touch one of those potatoes. Sure thing, dearie, but I'm as blind as a bat, so I'll have to feel around for them. And she began to feel. Oh, so there's one there. And there's definitely two. And I think that's 3. And 4. And that must be the last one. And Anansi turned and said, what are you doing? That's not how you count. Count them again. Count every single one. And Ethel went again. Well, there's 1. And 2. And 3. And 4. And that must be the last one. You're not counting, woman. You're not counting them properly. I want you to count every single one. Everyone. I know you're blind and I know you do this to wind me upon you. I just want you to count them all, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, and the last one. Well, Anansi pushed that old lady to the side. He picked up one of those potatoes and he said, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And when he said that final number, Anansi disappeared. and old Lady Ethel walked past, proudly holding on to the last roll of toilet roll. And boys and girls, that's why we must never ever say the number 5. Ha! That's a silly story. So, for the 1st of January, that's the story I'm going to tell. As I said, it's a bit rugged around the edges, but it's a lovely story. Little side note, I took that story to Sweden for like a storytelling experience, and they absolutely slated it. There were so many issues. They said that I shouldn't pretend that the number's still powerful. They said I need to work out who Anansi visits and why and all this. And there was a period I thought, you know what? It's not worth it. I'm just going to put that story to one side and never tell it again. But with it being a new year, let's get it out. Let's try and do something with it. Let's share it with you. So that's what I've done today. Side note, I am also trying to dedicate every day of this year to a special word. A word that may have meaning, a word that's underrated, or just a word that we like saying. So I'm trying to ask everyone who is listening to these sort of videos to share with me, maybe in the comments, or message me or email me any way that you want, words that you like. My word for today is alas. I think last year I read that it was one of the most used words, especially in the political terms. And I just think it's a nice, somewhat sarcastic response to something. It creates a strange tragedy to it. And alas, just fits with any scenario in any context. So, I have just decided during this video, my word of January the 1st, 2021 is going to be alas. And alas, it brings us to the end of the video. Until the next time, stay safe and tell stories. And that is the story I have shared with you today.